On this episode of MotoringBox, we're going to be upgrading the fuel injectors on my BA Falcon XR6 Turbo. Welcome back to MotoringBox. I'm Sean McKellar. This is my 2004 BA Falcon XR6 Turbo. And today we are continuing our journey for maximum power. Well, not maximum, but mild power. And one thing we need on the way to that destination is to upgrade the fuel injectors on this engine. Now, I'm not really sure what injectors this engine actually has at the moment. I know they're stock, but I believe, or I have a hunch, a fairly well-educated hunch, that they have been high-flowed or decapped. That's based on a 15-year-old article I found, because this car was tuned by Redcliffe Dyno with a piggyback ECU. I'll put a video up in the corner for anyone who missed that. As standard, I believe these cars had injectors which flowed around 300cc. But what we're doing today is we're going to get rid of these injectors because they're kind of unknowns in a way, and we're going to be replacing them with a set of Bosch 1000cc injectors. So I believe these 1000cc units should be very suitable for the sort of power figures I have in mind. So after the really dodgy injector experience I had on the AU Fairmont with the no-name injectors I got off eBay, I've gone legit Bosch injectors this time around. And it is important to understand that a lot of people can't actually do this at home, because if you upsize your injectors, your ECU is not going to be able to handle or run the engine because it's going to be outside the parameters as to what that ECU can adjust to. Whereas if you have a standalone ECU like this Haltech Pro plugin, which we installed last time, which I'll put a link up in the corner again, you can actually simply log into the Haltech EMS software, update the injector specs, and your car will still run. We of course still need to get this tuned at the end, but it is nice to know that we can still perform these upgrades, we can still have the car run, and we can still eventually drive it to the dyno later on. So I'm not going to ramble too much in this episode because I'm a little bit short on time. So let's just get straight into it. Alrighty, so we're doing something which I've done many times before. We have to get the crossover piece off the top of this engine, so it's all fun and games. We can still get to a few of the injectors, but we have to get the throttle body off. We have to get all of this shit off the top to help our access. So it is a little bit of a pain in the ass. If you've got a side entry plenum, you wouldn't have to do any of this, but I've decided to persist and stick with this factory OEM intake. A lot of people criticize me about it because of all that untapped power you could get if you got rid of it. But I simply love the factory look of these cars, and I want to leave that alone. In the end, it's your car and it's your choice, so it's important to stick to your guns, I think. Sweet. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention as well. This blow-off valve, a lot of people have questions about how I get my car to flutter, and it's because of this thing. So this is actually a really cheap aftermarket blow-off valve I purchased. The brand is Epman, or EP-Man as I like to pronounce it. It was about 50 bucks, but it is a really good quality blow-off valve for the price. Like, it probably doesn't compare to some of the ones from GFB and things like that, but it is an all aluminium CNC routed construction, and it is adjustable. So you can twist this cap and compress the spring inside to make it really tight, which is what I've done to get that sort of flutter because the vent is opening less. Or you can soften it right off and make it almost like stock. So I'll leave a link in the video description if you want to buy one of these. I'm not affiliated with them, but for the price, it performs really well. Alrighty, so now we can get our throttle body off, and we just need to get some hex bits. You need to get long hex actually, which I've luckily got a set of. That one appears to be rounded off, which is fantastic. I think I bought some new bolts for this actually. I'm gonna have to hammer in a slightly oversized one, I believe, to get that off, which is not going to be fun. I don't know why Ford had to use hex here, like you could have used anything. Why didn't they just have regular bolts? Alright, it's actually hammered in, but whether or not it'll work is a different story. It's not working. What else could I use? You know, there's a meme on the internet that says you're only one snapped bolt away from a half-hour job turning into a weekend epic adventure, or something along those lines. And that's basically what's happened to me here. I went to take the throttle body off the inlet manifold, and 3 out of the 4 bolts which are holding that thing in actually have an inner hex bit, which are all rounded out. So I ran out of time last week. I was trying to take the top half of the manifold off so I could lift it and the throttle body out together and get access to the 2 bolts on the underside there, which are rounded out, and of course the one on the top. So that's where we're at this week. And I'm probably just going to grind the head of those bolts off because the throttle body is not actually threaded. They go straight through it and they thread into the top of the intake manifold. So if you take the heads off, the throttle body should just come straight off. And I'm actually planning to replace this throttle body anyway with a low kilometer spare that I have available. I bought that back in the day just because it was going cheap, and hey, I thought it'd be good to have a spare, and it turns out it's come in handy. So that's the plan. We're going to rip this off, and we'll throw our injectors in, and then we'll turn our attention to getting this old throttle body off, getting the new one installed, getting it all back together, and hopefully getting the engine running. Isn't it funny how jobs can really go tits up when you least expect it? Now, I'm pretty sure back in the day, I know that I rounded those bolts out, but I completely forgot about it. But the awesome news is, because of that knowledge, I've actually got some spare throttle body bolts, which I ordered back in the day, ready to go. So that means I can absolutely destroy these things getting them out, and it's going to be 100% fine. A couple of people noticed in the previous video that I had a hammer in the engine bay, and that's because when you're dealing with these sort of inner hex bolts, I love to literally give the thing a bit of a tap with a hammer just to make sure the bit or the hex bit is all the way down into that head of that bolt. Otherwise, you're running an increased chance of stripping it out. So yes, I'm not using that for any nefarious reasons, just to try and safely extract some of these bolts without causing further damage. Yeah, this job is not as simple as I remembered. There is a brace there under the throttle body as well, but luckily you can undo the other end of it and pull the whole thing out. Yeah, this is a terrible experience. I wonder if there's some different bolts I can put in here instead of these inner hex ones. I guess you can't really, because they're so close to the edge of the throttle body itself that you couldn't get a proper traditional socket down there onto it, no matter what the size, I guess. This is horrendous. Got a vacuum line here to the fuel rag, which I probably should get off as well. There we go. There should be nothing else apart from that. Apart from those lines down there. All of our intake runners look nice and clean, no oil, just a tiny little bit there, but that's almost nothing. So it looks like our oil catch can is doing a good job. So look, while this is out of the way, we may as well get to work replacing these injectors, because access, as you can see, is amazing. This 1/2" set is a little bit overkill, but it's here with a 10mm ready to go, so let's use it. So this part of the job should be nice and easy, and if everything went to plan last week, I would have been done probably within the hour, so it's just a shame how things can go. But you got to be prepared for that, especially on older cars like this, especially if you've got people like me working on them, rounding out bolts, even though it is incredibly easy to do. There's probably tips and tricks that mechanics use to avoid that from happening. Maybe the hex bit that I was using is a little bit worn. Probably need to get a new one. Now we can pull the rail off. So it is all a little bit grungy and grimy under here. But nothing we can't handle. So the injectors have some little clips that you just need to pull up slightly. and it should let you pull the connector straight off. So we just got to do that 6 more times. Oh, and we have these other clips as well, which have to come off to unclip them from the rail. So they basically just push straight down like a U shape. So let's have a look at this guy. Make sure the seals come off with it, 1 seal on each end. So this side says 3 R23-AA. This side says 0280156123. Okay, so here's the deal. This is one of our stock standard XR6 Turbo injectors. So take note of the length of it. Well, this here is one of the replacements which I ordered from Ants Performance. So these are rated at, I think it's 1000cc at 3 bars of fuel pressure, or about 1150cc at 4 bar, which is what these engines actually run. And you'll notice if I take this little protective cap off the end here that they are a little bit shorter. So let's line that up. There you go, you can see that. But they actually include these little adapter pieces. So I believe these shorter ones are designed for aftermarket fuel rails. But if you are running the stock rail, you have this little adapter piece, which I will lube this seal up and then slap that there on the end. So once we do that, try and line this up, it will be the same length. So yeah, we're going to lube this seal up, put the adapters on, and then we'll lube the front and also the back seal, and then we can start sliding them into the rail. So yeah, that's the plan.
You say you haven't been yourself for a long time. Barely awake and it is already
We'll offer the rail up, make sure the injectors are all matched up on their respective ports, and then we should just be able to start pushing that in. Beautiful. Once we bolt this rail back on, it will hold them all in place properly, but that looks fantastic. Tell you what guys, I'm starting to feel very positive. Things are turning around. Now I've just realized these clips don't actually fit these injectors because they don't have a notch or a groove for these to basically clip down onto them, so perhaps you don't need them anymore. And I guess when you think about it, that does make sense, because once this rail is bolted down, that's really creating the pressure on the injector seals and making sure everything seals up properly. So yeah, I guess there's nothing else to it. We just have to get everything connected back up again.
there's a heart that belongs to you.
So anything to do with fuel does make me a little bit nervous. So what I'm going to have to do is I'll probably prime the pump and just see if anything leaks out of here. Fingers crossed it does not. There was some sort of a relay in the fuse box over there buzzing. I'm guessing it's something to do with a piece that is not connected, like maybe the throttle position sensor or the throttle stepper motor itself. But the pump did prime, and I cannot see any fuel or anything at all around here, so I think we are good to go. Let's make it happen.
There's a heart that belongs to you.
Alrighty, so we're at the point where we can reinstall our replacement throttle body. So as I mentioned, this is off a low kilometer car. Should work fine. I can't see anything wrong with it. I have cleaned the mating surface. So we'll throw that on. And of course, I do have a brand new gasket as well, thankfully, to throw onto here. So this surface here also looks nice and clean, ready to go. So we can get to it. So the magic number we want for these bolts is 10 Newton meters. So I think that may have been my issue last time. I probably just over tightened them, and that caused the head of these bolts to round off, which wasn't cool. Alright, so we should be pretty much good to go. Aside from getting the intake and everything hooked up, do a test first before we hook everything else up and make sure it's all running properly. So firstly, what I need to do is go into the cabin with the laptop, hook into the Haltech ECU and do a throttle calibration. And then we also should be able to update the size of the injectors, and hopefully this engine will still run. Right guys, so I've already been into the car and I've recalibrated the throttle and the throttle position sensor on the Haltech ESP software. I didn't bother to show you guys because I've done it before in the previous video. I'll leave a link up there in the corner. But now we need to set the injector flow, or the CC flow value. However, these injectors are rated at 1000cc at 3 bar of fuel pressure or 1120 at 4 bar. And the information I could find online suggested that the stock fuel reg in this car is a 4 bar fuel reg. So we should just be able to go in here and type in 1120. But what we should be able to do now is reboot the ECU, cross our fingers and see if it starts. We still don't have all of the intake piping on, but this engine will still run and idle if we've got everything hooked up and configured correctly. So yeah, I'll do one final check and then we'll start this thing up. Everything looks like it's good to go. Still a little bit nerve-wracking though. All right, let's do it. Right, so the plot thickens. So the engine wants to run, and it does run initially very well, but all of a sudden, after just a couple of seconds, it stumbles and it'll simply eventually stall. So I'm getting an error code of 0373, which is an engine position fault. So I don't know, I shouldn't have messed with anything to do with the crank angle sensor or anything like that. It's really just the sensors in the manifold, and of course the intake piping is not reconnected or anything yet, but that shouldn't really affect any of that. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and reinstall that all anyway and see if it improves the situation. Otherwise, we're going to have to do some investigation. So yeah, I guess you'll have to watch this space. I don't really like to finish a video incomplete like that, but yeah, I'm out of time for today. So I'll do some investigation and I'll give you guys an update once I've figured out what's happening. But it is at least reassuring to know that when the engine initially fires, it runs beautiful. It's just after a couple of seconds that it all kind of falls over, unfortunately. So yeah, watch this space, and hopefully the next time I see you, I will have a solution to the problem. Luckily, we've got the Haltech ESP software and this beautifully powerful ECU right here to help us diagnose the problem. Might even have to get Haltech involved to see if they know of this fault and what possibly could be causing it. Hopefully it's not anything I've disturbed here in the wiring loom, which I had to repair in a previous video, but I'm not ruling it out because it might be. I did have to move the loom a little bit around the intake manifold here, so yeah, we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching guys, have a good one, I'll see you next time.